The day I realized my own family saw me as a wallet, I was sitting at a dinner table that I had paid for, eating food I had bought, in a house my salary kept running, and no one at that table thought to thank me. My name is Elena, and this is the story of how I gave everything I had to people who never once asked if I was okay. Welcome to Revenge Chronicles. Stay with me, because this one will change how you see the people closest to you forever. I was 34 years old, married for 7 years, and from the outside, my life looked like a success story. Good career, stable income, a husband who smiled in photos. But behind closed doors, I was living a very different reality, one where my paycheck was treated as a shared family resource, except no one shared anything back. My husband's mother, Marina, had a gift. She could make exploitation sound like love. Every comment was wrapped in warmth. Every request came disguised as family loyalty. She never asked me directly for money. She didn't have to. She worked through my husband, and my husband worked through silence and guilt and the slow, steady pressure that comes when someone you love keeps choosing someone else over you. It started small, the way these things always do. A medical bill here, a subscription charge there. Small transfers that looked like nothing until they lined up side by side and told a story I hadn't wanted to read. I told myself it was generosity. I told myself family helps family. I kept telling myself that right up until the night she raised a glass in front of a room full of people and thanked me for being a supportive wife and reminded everyone at that table that money stops being yours the moment you get married. Laughter rippled. My husband smiled, and something inside me went very, very quiet. Not the quiet of a woman who had given up. The quiet of a woman who had finally decided. I want you to understand something important before I keep going, because I know some of you are sitting there thinking, why didn't she just say something sooner? Why didn't she confront him earlier? And I want to be honest with you about this. The way Revenge Chronicles is always honest, because that question deserves a real answer. Women like me, women who are capable, who earn well, who hold things together, we are trained from birth to be reasonable. We are told that a good wife smooths things over. We are told that patience is a virtue. We are told that making things awkward is worse than being humiliated quietly. I believed that for 7 years. I smiled through dinners that made my skin crawl. I answered questions about my salary with calm, measured words while her eyes flicked to my purse. I drove home in a car I paid for beside a man who told me to ignore it. And I kept waiting, the way so many of us wait, for the moment he would choose me. That moment never came. What came instead was a conversation over coffee, casual as weather, where my husband mentioned that his mother was thinking of downsizing and wondering if we could help bridge the gap. That word landed like a stone in still water. I asked how much. He paused. That pause was its own kind of answer. When he finally named the number, it was almost exactly my monthly net income. Not our savings. Not a joint decision. Mine. I laughed once, sharp and surprised, and asked him if he had already agreed. He said they had talked about it. And I had learned by then that talking was just the warm-up to yes. That night, I opened my laptop. Not in anger, but in the particular clarity that comes when a fog you have been living in for years suddenly lifts and you see the landscape for exactly what it is. I went through every shared account, every transaction. I followed the trail of small numbers no one expected me to follow, and what I found was not one betrayal, but dozens, each one small enough to dismiss alone, each one normal enough to explain away, but together they formed a picture I could no longer unsee. He thought I would never check. That assumption was his first real mistake. I did not cry. That surprised even me. I had spent so much of those 7 years worried about how my reactions would land, whether I was being too sensitive, too demanding, too difficult. But sitting there in the glow of my laptop screen with the full picture finally in front of me, I felt nothing except the steady, crystalline calm of a woman who has made a decision and knows it is the right one. I called my bank the next morning. I separated accounts. I changed authorizations. I drafted one email, polite and precise and completely unemotional, outlining what had been taken and what would need to be returned. No accusations. No raised voice. Just facts, organized and dated and impossible to argue with. Revenge does not need noise. It needs timing. And I had all the time in the world. The first call came 3 days later. Marina's voice was too sweet, the kind of sweet that has never once been earned. "Elena, darling," she said, "there seems to be a problem with the transfer this month." I let the silence stretch just long enough to feel deliberate, the way she had let her comments stretch for years, just long enough to sting without leaving a mark. "There is no problem," I said. "The access was temporary. It has been corrected." Her breath caught. A small sound, barely anything, but I had learned to hear the things people tried to hide. "We counted on that money," she said, and her voice had shifted now, the sweetness thinning at the edges. "I know," I replied. "That is exactly why I sent the email. Future expectations require agreement. Past withdrawals require reconciliation." She laughed then, brittle and disbelieving, the laugh of a woman who has never once been held accountable and cannot quite process that the world has changed around her. "You are being dramatic," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "I am being accurate." And I ended the call. That evening my husband came home with papers in his hand and panic behind his eyes. He spread them on the table like evidence, like he was the one who had been wronged, and he asked me why I had done all of this without telling him. I met his eyes steadily. "I warned you," I said. "Not her. You." He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. His mother was upset, he said, as if that were the point, as if her feelings were the weather, and my job was still to carry an umbrella for everyone else. "I am sure she is," I said. "She is not used to accountability." The next morning, a formal repayment request arrived in Marina's inbox. Itemized. Dated. Every transfer listed with its amount, and its date, and its description. Indisputable. I had not guessed at numbers. I had not estimated. I had documented everything with the same precision I brought to every other part of my professional life, the precision everyone had always praised while quietly assuming it would never be turned in their direction. That is when the tone changed. Not to anger, to fear. Fear is a different animal than anger. Anger performs. Fear moves. Marina stopped calling me entirely and went straight to my husband instead, the way she always had, because that triangle had worked so well for so long. Long voice messages, paragraphs of text, tears about humiliation and family and what good wives do and do not do. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said family does not keep ledgers. She said I was punishing her for loving her son. And for the first time in 7 years, none of it reached me, because I had quietly, deliberately removed myself from the triangle. I was no longer the third point. I was simply a woman with documentation and a very good lawyer. My husband came home late one night with red eyes and a flat voice and told me his mother was saying she might have to sell her apartment if this was not resolved. I nodded. "That is her decision," I said gently. The gentleness startled him more than anger would have. He had been bracing for a fight, and I had given him a fact. When the repayment deadline passed without a word from Marina, I did not chase her. I did not call. I did not send a reminder. I forwarded the complete documentation to the lawyer I had consulted quietly several weeks earlier, not to start a war, but to formalize what was already true. A letter arrived at Marina's door, professional and precise, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk. Privately. Urgently. The kind of urgency that had never existed when I was the one being drained. Here's the part one want you to stay for, because this is where Revenge Chronicles earns its name. When my lawyer reviewed the full financial history, he found something Marina had never expected me to notice, something she had not even realized she had exposed herself to. Years of transfers quietly funneled through my personal accounts had created tax implications she could not afford to have examined. My money had not just been convenient for her. It had been covering her. She had not simply been borrowing from me. She had been using my financial footprint as a shield, and the moment I pulled that shield away, everything she had been hiding behind it came into the light. She paid, quietly, fully, every dollar, not because she felt remorse, not because she had finally understood what she had done. She paid because she had no other choice, and the difference between those two things is everything. My husband sat across from me the evening after it was settled, and he looked at me the way you look at someone when you realize you never actually knew them at all. "You could have ruined her," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I gave her a choice. She made it." Then he asked the question I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. He asked if we were okay. And that question, those 3 small words, told me everything I needed to know about how little he had understood, even now, even after all of it. I looked at him for a long moment. I had spent 7 years being easy to step over because I loved him. I had smiled through dinners and absorbed humiliation and made myself smaller so that everyone around me could feel more comfortable. I had warned him, not once, not quietly in a whisper he could pretend not to hear, but clearly, directly, with my eyes open and my voice steady. And he had reached for his water glass. I moved out 2 weeks later, not in chaos, not in tears, peacefully, financially intact, legally clean. I took what was mine, left what was his, and walked out of a life that had been slowly taken from me for 7 years without ever once asking permission. Marina lost access. My husband lost the comfort of a woman who would absorb everything and ask for nothing in return. And I gained something I had forgotten I was allowed to have: control without cruelty, clarity without performance, a life that was entirely, unapologetically mine. If you are watching this right now and something in this story felt familiar, I want you to hear this directly. Silence is not peace. Patience is not endless. And the moment you stop being useful to people who never valued you as a person is the moment you find out exactly who they always were. Money reveals entitlement. Boundaries reveal character. And I learned exactly who they were the moment I finally stopped being easy to step over. This has been Revenge Chronicles. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have a story of your own, you know where to find us.